Hello folks, and thank you for tuning in to the Drew Deek Show. Today we're going to be talking about General Manager of the Montreal Canadiens, Marc Bergevin's top 10 trades and acquisitions as it pertains to this year's current roster and the roster going forward. We're going to start with number 10, and that is Brett Kulak. Brett Kulak is a player that relies a lot on his confidence. When he's feeling good about his game, he is a guy that can be relied on in a bottom six role, even a top four role if there's injuries and he needs to be called up. He is a reliable player. He's been really stable. He's an affordable player for the Montreal Canadiens. The two players that actually were traded for Brett Kulak are currently unsigned. So I definitely thought that that was a good deal, as Brett Kulak is becoming and has become a good, solid defenseman for the Canadiens. At number 9, Joel Edmondson. And I gotta say, I would like to have ranked these guys higher than I did, but it was difficult. I mean, Bergie's been really active, especially this last offseason with all the acquisitions he made, and this one was an important one. Joel Edmondson, again, solidifying Montreal's six defensemen that they're currently going with. Edmondson is playing with Jeff Petrie right now, and he was traded for a 5th-round pick. Edmondson clearly has already showed his strengths now. I know a lot of us didn't like the first game against the Leafs, and some fans were already calling to trade Edmondson, but that quickly changed in my opinion. He proved that he can be a stable force back there. A tough guy. He's 6'4", over 200 pounds, and of course stepped up to fight Tyler Myers in Joel Armia's absence as he went down with concussions after Myers hit. But not only that, Edmondson's playing with Jeff Petrie, and they could be one of the toughest pairings, I believe, to play against in the entire NHL the rest of the way. And Edmondson is now signed for 4 years at a decent cap hit, right around $3.5 million, right where Ben Sherratt signed. So definitely a pick that I liked. At number 8, we just talked about him, Joel Armia. Armia has become a crucial part of the top 9 of the Montreal Canadiens. He showed a lot of fans and really his teammates, and I think even himself, that he's a better player than he thinks he is. And Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette helped to show me that when Armia plays, I don't know if he realizes how hard he is to get off the puck, how strong he is on it, and how good of a teammate, even a playmaker he can be. Had some great chemistry a few games into the season already with Tyler Toffoli before Armia went down with his injury. So what did Armia get traded for? Armia was traded from the Winnipeg Jets with Steve Mason in a cap dump of over $5 million to the Montreal Canadiens back in 2018. So you can see that in my mind, Montreal definitely got the value that they wanted out of this deal. Armia, can't wait to see him back. At number 7, Jake Allen. It's taken a long time to try to get Carey Price, a really solid backup goaltender that the Canadiens and Carey Price can rely on while Carey gets some rest. This was another cap dump for the St. Louis Blues, as they had to trade Allen away in hopes, at first I would think, of trying to keep Alex Pietrangelo, but they weren't able to do that. And they knew that Binnington was going to be their starter, worst case scenario. In this deal from St. Louis also came a 7th-round pick along with Allen. And so far, in just a couple of games with the Canadiens, Jake Allen has really showed how valuable, how strong and sturdy he can be in net for the Canadiens, already adding some peace of mind and putting the Canadiens brass at ease as he's able to step in and really help out Carey Price. And he's going to continue to do that for the remainder of this season. A really nice trade for the Montreal Canadiens. Didn't have to give up much, only a 3rd and a 7th-round pick. At number 6, Tyler Toffoli. This one is not a trade, but a free agent acquisition in the offseason by Marc Bergevin, really adding another great, solid top 6 piece to the forward group in Tyler Toffoli, a Stanley Cup winner, a guy with some pedigree, has some experience, and is already showing a scoring touch with this team and was named the Player of the Week last week in the NHL. This was a free agent signing, so obviously the Canadiens didn't have to give up anything, which was a nice thing to see in getting a player like Toffoli, who we are just seeing the beginning stages, hopefully, of what he can bring to the Montreal Canadiens. At number 5, Josh Anderson. Now, you may be wondering why I ranked Anderson above Toffoli, being that we've already seen a pretty great scoring touch from Toffoli, but we've actually seen scoring from both of these players. Josh Anderson was traded for Max Domi and a 3rd-round pick, and really this trade actually began a couple years ago with the trade of Alex Galchenyuk for Max Domi, so that ended up becoming the Max Domi trade, which then became the Josh Anderson trade. And this was a big acquisition for the Canadiens, and really, to me, signified from Marc Bergevin that this team was no longer going to be pushed around. They want to have some size, some speed, and some skill, and you get all 3 in Josh Anderson. We saw that right away in Game 1 against the Leafs, and we're still seeing it, and he's going to be, again, just a fun player to watch as he plays with Nick Suzuki and Jonathan Drouin the rest of the season. Number 4, Shea Weber. Weber for Subban, the trade that all these years later people still somehow love to talk about, and now I think more people are convinced that the Canadiens have won this trade with now Captain Shea Weber leading this Canadiens team. I did like PK for a while, I'm not gonna lie, but eventually his novelty began to wear off, right? And then he got that huge contract, and Weber has really stepped in and showed that he's not only a great leader, but he can still put up points. He's 35 years old, he still has that huge slap shot, great on the power play, really just great in so many areas of the game, one of the meanest, toughest players to play against, and really somebody that can intimidate you. And I just love a lot of things about Shea Weber's game and this trade. I was on my honeymoon actually when I got the news that PK was traded. It was like 2 weeks without internet. We're in Barcelona, Spain in the hotel. I get the notification that PK was traded. And honestly, at first I was sad. I was actually like, oh, PK's gone. And then about 5 minutes later, literally, I started thinking about, wow, we have Shea Weber now. So it didn't take long for me personally to get over this trade, and the results immediately showed in Shea Weber's first season with the Canadiens, and from there on out, he's really, I think, grown on most, if not all, Habs fans. At number 3, this was a toss-up between number 2 and 3. It was really tough to pick this one, but it's Jeff Petrie. Jeff Petrie was traded at the trade deadline in what I think was Marc Bergevin's hands-down best trade at the deadline for a second-round pick and a conditional fifth-round pick. General manager of the Edmonton Oilers at the time, Craig McTavish, says to this day that trading Jeff Petrie was one of the biggest mistakes that he ever made. Since then, Petrie has re-signed a 6-year extension with the Canadiens, and then just this offseason, re-signed for another 4 years with the Canadiens, and said how as soon as he got his first taste of playoff hockey in Montreal, he loved it so much that he absolutely 100% wanted to stay. To me, Petrie right now, single-handedly our best defenseman on the Canadiens. At number 2, Phil Deneau and a second-round pick in the 2018 NHL entry draft, who of course became none other than Alex Romanov. So this deal saw Thomas Fleischmann and Dale Weiss go from the Canadiens to Chicago for their 2016 playoff run, where they lost in 7 games to the St. Louis Blues in the first round. So to say the Canadiens won that trade would be an understatement, because you got Phil Deneau, who became their number 1 center for at least a few years here, no matter what happens with him going forward. And then you've got now potentially a superstar defenseman in Alex Romanov, so definitely a deal that they won by a landslide. Take a wild guess who the number 1 trade or acquisition is going to be on this list, and that of course is, yes, Corey Perry. Just kidding, no, it was actually Nick Suzuki and Thomas Tatar, along with a second-round pick to the Canadiens for Max Pacioretty. This was a deal where Thomas Tatar, believe it or not, was the throw-in, and Nick Suzuki was the key piece for the Canadiens in this deal, which for years now, the Canadiens have been looking for a player like Suzuki, a 200-foot player, a number 1 center who, I know he's not quite there yet, but who has a lot of signs to his game being compared to already, of course, Patrice Bergeron. Suzuki's a 200-foot player with good size, a heck of a lot of skill, really good defensively. He's getting better in the face-off circle, just a 200-foot player that you notice on every single shift and in every end of the ice. I had the pleasure of actually interviewing Nick a couple years ago when he was with Owen Sound, before he made his championship playoff run with Oshawa. Just a fantastic guy. I mean, it was a pleasure. It kind of inspired me to get this broadcasting journey started. A couple honorable mentions that didn't make the list. Paul Byron claimed for nothing on the waiver wire 2 back-to-back 20-goal seasons, which helped earn him an extension with the Montreal Canadiens. And then after that, of course, Corey Perry. We don't know the future of Paul Byron. His cap hit is a little over $3 million right now, which is a bit more than you want to pay for a fourth-line player, but he does a lot. He's great on the penalty kill. They still call him Breakaway Byron at times. He's a leader. That was a wise move and a good eye on the Canadiens for picking him up. And the other one, Corey Perry. Corey Perry just had his first game with the Canadiens and obviously impressed in his debut, scoring a goal, putting in some good hard minutes, doing his job, not being a goon like he's been known for in the past. Perry's a guy that you just want to have around in the playoffs. And I would even throw Michael Frolik into this mix, but we haven't seen Frolik play yet. So these guys are on the taxi squad typically, or going to be in and out of the lineup throughout the season. But to me, I just think playoffs when I think of Perry or Frolik. And looking at Frolik's stats too, 850 games, he was no slouch with his stats throughout his career, and actually won a Stanley Cup with the Chicago Blackhawks as well. So this list is quickly compiled of Montreal Canadiens that are no longer on the team, but when they were still fun to have when we acquired them. Max Domi, Alex Radulov, Thomas Vanek, Kovalchuk, Andrew Shaw, Brandon Prust, Dale Weiss, Eric Cole, Danny Briere, Nate Thompson, and Mike Weaver. Some ones that stick out there are Kovalchuk. I mean, it was just super fun to get him last year, when really we knew the playoff hopes were pretty much diminished for the Canadiens. Kovalchuk came in and kind of, again, was that spark plug type of player that just gave the Canadiens something to kind of just entertain their fans with, and it certainly worked for a little while. Alex Radulov was fun to have for a while, and I'm kind of glad, though, that we didn't sign him to the extension that he was looking for, because now we had the money to spend on the players that we currently have, like Toffoli, Anderson, Edmondson, you name them, and they are just, I'm glad we waited. That's all I want to say about that. Now let's very quickly run through the worst signings or trades that the Canadiens made. I'm just going to rhyme them off very quick here. I don't want to add any more negative juju, like I mentioned, to what's hoping to be a very good Canadian season this year, and many more to come with the new direction that they're going in. So really quickly, Carl Alzner. We know he got his contract bought out, but probably the worst signing that Marc Bergevin had to make. I say had to because losing Andrei Markov, he had to sign Alzner. I think that's another story for another time. Alex Semin, never really got to see much of him. Mark Streit, Hemsky, Dwight King, Steve Ott, Martinson. Those guys came in the 2017 playoff run. They never really amounted to much because obviously we didn't last in the playoffs that year for very long. Lastly, it's probably the most debatable, and that's of course Mikhail Sergachev for Jonathan Drouin. This trade has not fully played itself out. A lot of us could probably agree that right now Tampa Bay is winning this trade with Mikhail Sergachev. I mean, to be honest, like the guy went to a Tampa Bay team that was already poised to be a Stanley Cup contender, and then of course they won. But you got guys like Victor Hedman to play with. Anyways, but Jonathan Drouin, we're still hoping to see the best out of him yet. He's playing with Suzuki and Anderson. If he continues to build on the chemistry with them going forward, who knows what'll come out of it. But if we got a Stanley Cup or two behind us in the next 3 to 5 years, and Jonathan Drouin contributes to that, I think we can just overlook that trade. And whether or not we won it won't matter, because we'll have won a Stanley Cup, which is what matters above all else. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Drew Deek Show, my first time doing a trade and acquisition video. Next up will be a top 10 draft video for the Montreal Canadiens. Keep an eye out for that one. And then of course, continue to watch my post-game reactions as I react to each and every Montreal Canadiens game, as many as I can get to. So far, I've gotten to all of them. And I really appreciate the support so far, guys. So subscribe to the Drew Deeks channel if you have not already. Really appreciate the support. Go Habs, go. And we'll see you guys soon.